In this edition, we go to Britain. The UK Housing Minister says Prime Minister Theresa May will give Parliament another chance to debate and vote on Brexit this month. James Brokenshire said the vote might not be the decisive one on the measure, but he said that the government is likely to hold a series of non-binding votes on possible alternatives in case of disagreement on the deal. May wants to get legally binding changes to the controversial Northern Irish backstop, which she believes will be enough to get her deal through the House of Commons. She's due to update Parliament on her progress in talks with the EU on Wednesday. British lawmakers in January overwhelmingly rejected the deal she had agreed with Brussels last year. They're scheduled to hold a final vote on the issue by the end of February. Well, to offer us more insight on this edition of Press TV's Newsroom, we've got lecturer of Coventry University, Mr. Kenneth Farrow, joining us from London, and also joining us from Bristol, we have investigative journalist Mr. Tony Gosling. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Kenneth Farrow in London. What are your expectations for the next round of debates on the supposed changes to the Brexit deal?
Well, my expectations are much more chaos, much more political trickery, politricks it's called, and a complete and utter failure by the current government to actually deal with this issue of Brexit. The fundamental causes of why the vote happened in the first place aren't being addressed. We have a situation where the European community has actually said that the proposal by the leader of the opposition is much more likely to be accepted by the other 27 nations than the current government. And of course, that's very humiliating for Theresa May, as it should be. It's just total and utter chaos. And if you have any sense of what's happening in the UK at the moment, it's a person after person coming up with the solution. And of course, somebody else has got issues with that, but they're not really dealing with the fundamental problems of why 52% of the people that voted in this referendum actually decided to leave the EU. We'll have to see what happens with the vote coming this week, but I expect just more chaos.
And Mr. Gosling, your thoughts on the vote that will be held this month. Will Theresa May get closer to any form of agreement, or is it going to be the opposite?
Well, it's just another vote, isn't it? We've been having quite a lot of these votes. The fact is, though, that Parliament is opposed to Brexit. It doesn't want Brexit. The majority is actually against Brexit. So Parliament is not really reflecting what the people voted for. But, I mean, you could say it's chaos going on in Britain. You could also say it's tough negotiation. Now, there's a lot at stake here. I mean, really, it's the future of 65 million people as to whether they're going to be governed from Westminster or Brussels. You could also blame Theresa May. That's very easy. You could also blame the European Union and Brussels for being intransigent many times. I mean, David Cameron, if you remember, before the referendum was doing this, going backwards and forwards from London to Brussels, begging for some changes and getting nowhere. And we still hear from the Labour Party, by the way, the opposition here in Britain, that we can negotiate we need to get better deals from Brussels. They're not going to give us any better deals. So I think actually this is really Theresa May really trying to give herself some more ammunition to go back to Brussels and say again, we want more, we've got to have a better deal, otherwise you're going to get no deal. And I think Brussels are also, it's a kind of game of chicken, a game of brinksmanship. And of course, that's going to continue right down the line until the 29th of March, when finally we either exit the European Union or we have some sort of fudge deal where we just carry on. Now, there's a really good reason why we cannot really do the second, and that is because all of the financial markets are saying, with one united voice, end the uncertainty. Let's get on with this and not prevaricate. And of course, another way that would prevaricate is if there was to be another vote. That may delay things for another 2 years. And all the financial people, all the business people are saying, look, just get this over with, please, and let's move on.
Mr. Farrow, it seems that Prime Minister Theresa May thinks that if she gets an agreement on the controversial Northern Irish backstop issue, then she can pass the deal altogether as well. Is that really the biggest hurdle, the backstop on the Irish border?
No, I think there are many more hurdles. I mean, the so-called backstop is obviously something which they're having to deal with. But the fundamental issues around Brexit and around Britain and Britain's position in terms of Ireland hasn't really been addressed. Of course, there wouldn't be this issue if Britain wasn't occupying Northern Ireland. And this is something that seems to have escaped many of the people who are discussing this issue. The north of Ireland should be part of Ireland and shouldn't be associated with this situation at all. But that's the real situation we're in. But nevertheless, because these things have historically been ignored, because these things haven't been dealt with, because the issue of the decline of the economy in the UK hasn't been dealt with. These are all things which were used to create fear in people and to put the UK in the situation it is at the moment. There were very fundamental issues in terms of government, in terms of economics, and in terms of class, and in terms of race that came to the fore when the referendum was announced. And these issues have really been around for much longer than the current situation. And whether Brexit happens or not, and whatever happens, it won't solve the problems in the United Kingdom. They will have to be dealt with in a much more mature political way than they have been in the past 2 decades. And we need a kind of government which will actually confront these issues and not serve the interests of the elite and not just pander to the needs of businesses. It really doesn't matter whether business want Brexit to happen quickly or not quickly. That's irrelevant. The relevance of this is in terms of the integrity of the United Kingdom and the needs of the people of the United Kingdom, whether you believe in Brexit or not, on what side you voted. There are fundamental issues in the UK that need to be dealt with, and these have to be addressed. They should be being addressed in the current discussion.
Mr. Gosling, you were shaking your head there. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the issue.
Well, it's just a historical fact. It's not an occupation of the North. That was part of the settlement that ended the Irish Civil War and that brought about the creation of Southern Ireland, because there was a big Protestant majority in the North who was simply not going to allow independence for the country of Ireland. And so to bring peace at the end of the Civil War and the creation of the Irish Free State, there was a decision to have 2 separate countries, Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. And then the peace began. Now, there's a lot of people that want a united Ireland. I'm one of those, but I don't think that this is a very good way to do it by saying, well, now because the whole of the UK has voted for Brexit, then this is a good excuse to separate off the North from the South. If you want to do this, let's give the Northern Irish people their own referendum saying, do they want to be part of England and the rest of the UK, or do they want to be part of Southern Ireland? We would need a separate vote. They didn't vote on that in the referendum. But look, the backstop is very important. Of course it's very important. It's the big sticking point. And if this was in some way organised so that we could have a limit to the time, maybe only just 2 years or something, in order to make some sort of arrangement between the North and Southern Ireland, maybe eventually to have a hard border of some sort, maybe not. But to allow a limited period of time, that may get the deal through. But I don't honestly see that happening, because the DUP, who hold the balance of power in Westminster, are simply not going to accept it.
All right, thanks a lot. So, from Bristol, investigative journalist Tony Gosling, and from the British capital, London, lecturer of Coventry University, Kenneth Farrow. Gentlemen, thank you for contributing to this segment of the program. That brings us to an end here on this edition of the News Review. Do stay tuned, though. There's more news to come.